Hi guys, welcome back. And this time around, I'm bringing you a review from the newly rebranded NFAudio and now known as NFACOUS, which will probably stand for NF Acoustics. NFACOUS has been around for 10 years, since 2014. And they've always focused on IEMs tailored for professional usage, monitoring usage, studio, and to that effect, they've kind of created not only a solid name for themselves, but they've divided up their series of products into let's say three categories. They've got the professional series, which is what the NM20 belongs to. And in the professional series, we have models like the NM2 Plus. I've got here the NA2 Plus, which is this one here. No, sorry, NA2 Plus. The difference between the NA and the NM is, in essence, the color of the shell. The NM is a silver shell, and it's got a slightly different driver, although the overall tuning actually is not that different from the NA. The NA, it belongs really to another series, which is a music series. But anyway, going back to the NM series, we have then the NM2 Plus, we have the NM2, which was the, let's say, the predecessor, the NM2, this one here, okay. And probably one of the most successful IEMs that the NFACOUS has had. I believe they sold something like 100,000 units of this particular model. And now obviously we got here the NM20, which is let's say the successor to the NM2. Obviously I'm not using the stock cable, as you can see, but I'll get to that in a second. The other models that I've got here are models which I thought made sense to better understand not only the whole concept of NFACOUS tuning, but how they stack up against each other. I've got here the RG15, which is part of their gaming series, and I've got here the RA15, which is part of their music series. And these two have got basically the same driver, just different tuning styles, and this one's got adjustable nozzles. And on the end here, I've got a Venture Electronics CA. Why do I have it here? Because this also has a tuning style similar to NFACOUS stuff, although it's the warmer. So if actually the way I've placed it here is this will be the warmest sounding, and this will be the more clinical sounding. Okay, so this will be the one with the most organic sound. This will be the one with the most clinical sound, and the other ones are all in betweens. You might be asking, but Tony Akros, why you got here the RG if this is a gaming IEM or gaming tuned IEM? Well, because in essence, when you actually listen to it, it sounds pretty close to the NM20, pretty close, and I thought it made sense. As for the RA15, which I've got here, this one I've done a little, I've done my little magic on it. I won't deny it. I didn't enjoy the stock nozzles that it brought. The stock nozzles emphasized way too much the 4, 5, 6, 7K area, way too much. So I ended up retuning one of the nozzles. Both nozzles basically kind of worked the same or sounded the same. So I retuned one of the nozzles and I gave it my own little touch, and it came together much better. The only problem with the RA15 ultimately is that it's at the price point where there's a lot of very competent competition, not really good English there, but or very solid competition. And I understand the whole NFACOUS tuning. I understand it, I respect it, but I believe that this is just pushing it way too much. It's just too much, and it doesn't, in its stock format with its stock nozzles. I have a hard time believing that there are going to be people that will really enjoy the sound of the RA15. It's just too energetic. At low volumes, it's okay. It's fine, but then the moment you give it a little bit of extra, oomph, it just like it honestly wants to kill you. Okay, now there are in essence three sorts of driver, or three models of the driver that NFACOUS has used over the years. They name the drivers the MC2L driver, and they have certain peculiarities. Those drivers, they have certain, let's say, characteristics. And this one, the RA15, the RG15, and the NA Plus on this end, they all use that same driver. The same version of that driver, let me put it that way. The NM2 uses another version of that driver, and this one, the NM20, now uses the latest version, which, while the others all had, let's say, a composite diaphragm, this one now uses a beryllium diaphragm, okay? And that beryllium coated diaphragm does show itself in then the sound that overall the NM20 has, okay? Let me now just quickly show you the box, because I promised I would. It's always the very, I mean, this is the usual packaging that NFACOUS always has. You know, it's a nice box, no waifus, you know, just showcasing the product with characteristics. It's a very nice box, very nicely done. The actual box itself also has a particular style which they're known for, which is they've got like this kind of CD over here which holds the IEMs themselves. There's the MS tips underneath that, which they are okay. I use the tips. The problem with the MS tips is that they are a little bit on the soft side, and I've actually got the MS tips on the NM20 there, and in the case of the NM20, the reason why they ended up working okay is that because the shape of the shell allows it to seat relatively deep in my ear. Excuse me. That collapsing of the outer part of the ear tip doesn't happen as much, and it just works. The cable, I mean, it's a nice cable if you're going to be using it, I guess, for monitoring on stage, so you don't want anything that's nice and that's like this heavy and so on. So for its intended application, I think the cable is fine. It works fine. There's no real issue here with the cable. I thought I would put that cable because it just looks nicer. It's blue, it matches the IM, and that's it. Basically, I did it because I did it. So there you go. The casing is simple, brings some nice accessories, brings a nice little carrying case as well, which is cool. You know, it's good enough for the IM. It's very pocketable, so nothing to be said there. Okay, let's jump into the sound, because that's what we want to know, and not drag this here for hours. NFACOUS has a particular style, which is a style that the mids, upper mids and treble are always very energetic. The interesting or the curious thing about it is that when you look at the graphs and then when you hear the IEM, you know, it doesn't match, and this happens very much so here with the NM20. When you see the graph, you think that this is going to try and murder you at every instance, and that, you know, it's just got way too much energy there in that 4, 5, 6, 7K area, and then in reality, no. It actually works out quite well, quite decent. There's a lot of detail, and that's the kind of the signature style for NFACOUS, because they are, especially the professional series, to be used in monitoring and staging and so on. They are super clean, super detailed, and they do it in a manner which doesn't become you know, aggressive or harsh or anything of the sort. There are other styles of tuning, like I've mentioned. For example, the style that they used here, which follows the same thing, the balance that they've struck between the bass and then the upper mids and treble here is not so favorable, and that's why I had to retune it, because it was just too much. But on the opposite end, when you look at, for example, the NA2+, it's the one that has the most neutral bass, while still maintaining the mids, upper mids and treble in a nicely emphasized manner. And when you listen to it, you think, but hold on, this by graph shouldn't be having this much bass. That's why, you know, I've said it countless times. Graphs are an indicator, but they're not always a true representation of what an IEM actually does sound once you put it into your ears. Another example that jumps to mind is the Symphony Ears Tetrad. You look at the graph and you think, okay, and then when you listen to it, you say, oh my God, but what is this? I mean, this sounds totally different to what the graph was apparently telling me. Look, why is that? I really don't know, but that's the reality. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't trust to a certain extent graphs, and you shouldn't pay attention. Yes, pay attention to the graphs to a certain extent, but also keep an open mind for those outliers that will, on the one hand, actually sound worse than what the graph sometimes looks, and those that also will sound way better than what the graph also looks. All right, getting back here to the NM20. It's the successor to the NM2, and the NM2, great bass, really nice, fast, dynamic bass. Nothing wrong with the initial part of the mids, and the only part that then they just kind of fall slightly out of whack is the transition from mids to upper mids, and that transition from mids to upper mids on the NM2 kind of is a little bit unpolished at times. Is it down to the shell? Is it down to the tuning? Is it down to the driver? It can be a multitude of things or combination of those aspects. But overall, the reality is this: the NM2 is, and I've always enjoyed the NM2, and I've always liked the sound of the NM2. The bass is clean, precise. I mean, showcasing definitely the quality of the driver, without a doubt. And then yes, you do have that kind of lack of polish, that somewhat brutish type of presentation in the transition from mids to upper mids. But overall, it comes together nicely and it sounds nice. On the NM20, what they've done is, obviously they've improved the driver, they've touched up on the bass, they've improved the bass, and you notice that the bass here is more incisive, clean, and more impactful. But they've also given it more energy up top to counteract or to counterbalance that. And so the balance that overall is struck between the two extremes of the frequencies is very nice. The bass never overpowers the mids, and the treble, the high, also, although intense and energetic, never also overpowers the mids or the bass. There's even a slight roll off on the lowest of the bass. It's nothing that you're really going to pick up to when you listen. The bass, instead of rising continuously, no, it rises, it plateaus, and then it actually drops off slightly closer to 20-30 hertz. And I think that's in an attempt to, first of all, it's sub-bass frequencies. You don't really get a lot of music with sub-bass frequencies, if any music, except for digitally created music or electronically created music. Very few, let's say, more normal type of music will go that low. And by doing that, they then make sure that the bass is, yes, emphasized, but clean and dynamic and capable of being very, very fast. There's very much a feel of kind of that speed that you get from BAs in terms of how the bass comes across. But that's not only the case here with the NM20. That's something that you kind of feel is also a type of a signature that NFACOUS has for their drivers. The mids, like I said, are then the ones that are kind of the star of the show overall. Although emphasized, they are the ones which are the showcase, but with a nice balance and with a nice coherence between, like I said earlier, the bass and the treble. Instruments, guitars, or anything. And I mean, honestly, I'm not gonna say that they sounded harsh or aggressive, because I really didn't find that it sounded like that. It sounded intense, energetic, and I had to actually lower the volume way before I even reached the point where I said no, because it was too much in terms of overall volume, and I could feel that the driver and the sound that was coming was clean and dynamic, and without it having any signs of being strained. I hope I was able to explain myself. So it's a very high energy capable IEM in terms of its sound. And ultimately what led me to lower the volume was it was just getting way too loud. as opposed to, okay, now I feel that the driver is kind of reaching its limit, and now it's breaking down, and things are becoming unpolished, harsh, or anything of the sort, which was what happened a little bit with the NM2. The NM2, once you started pushing the volume, you started noticing that kind of, not so much the driver breaking up, but it just lost its polish, its elegance. While here you kind of carry on pushing it and pushing it, and like I said, with me, ultimately I lowered it because the volume was just getting way too loud. So in essence, what I can say is that yes, for me personally, and with the music that I listen to, I didn't find anything to be too much, or in the sense of, oh, now it's aggressive, I don't like listening. No, it's you'll actually enjoy listening to it pretty loud. Ultimately, what will then dictate you lowering it or stopping to listen is because it's just you can't endure listening to music loud for hours. For a little bit, fine, that's fine. And if you do have an IEM that is capable of you listening to it loud for a long time, it's because it's been tuned in a much smoother, less energetic manner. Again, don't forget, this is an IM that was made for monitoring, for stage usage, but because of the way that they've tuned the bass, it's now become very capable of playing music. I would say definitely way more capable of playing music properly than the NM2 was. And even by saying that, I'm not saying that the NM2 wasn't capable of playing music properly. It was, but when you compare the two, you can see that this one is going to do that musical reproduction in a more correct manner, and so approximate itself more to what the NA series is capable of doing. Okay, compared here to the NA2 Plus, which is from the music series. Obviously, you see that this one doesn't have the same sort of bass. That's very evident. The way it was tuned. It's not there. It's a clean, highly detailed bass, highly energetic in terms of its incisiveness, its speed, but it lacks weight, and that then does make at least some of the music that I like listening to sound a little bit thin. Something that never happens with the NM20. The NM20, doesn't really matter what I listen to, be it From Dusk to Dawn from George Duke, or be it Elephant from Carol Dubach, or Holding On from Gregory Porter, or Feels Good from Rashaan Patterson, or Up and Up from Jeff Ryan. It's always got enough bass to give all of those songs the desired emphasis that needs to be given. That's just it. Compared here with the RG and with the RA. With the RG, the sound is very, very similar. Actually, I was quite surprised. You notice, however, that yes, this in terms of the upper mids and trebles got just a little extra amount of energy over the RG, and so that extra amount of energy just confers it just a little bit more extra cleanliness to the sound. It's not a huge day and night difference, but it does make it a little bit cleaner. In terms of the bass, very similar bass, although they are using two different drivers of that MC2L series drivers. The bass is actually quite similar. I would say the cause for that is, here we have a metal shell, here we have a plastic shell, and again I think it's the metal shell that does play that factor here, because the NA2 Plus, although having been tuned in a manner where the bass is very modest, very neutral, the fact that it uses a metal shell does confer then a different timbre and tonality to the bass, and that's something that with careful listening you actually do notice the difference in terms of the tonality and the timbre. Which is going to be the one that I like the most or the least? I would say that the overall timbre that pleased me the most, that satisfied me the most, was the NM20, the RG, and the RG15 and the RA15, but modified like it is here. These three have the nicest timbre and tonality. These two, the timbre and tonality, is cold, a little bit too cold here, a little bit I would say it's warm, but it's like kind of a fake warm. It's difficult to kind of explain and to convey. You'd have to listen to both to understand what I'm talking about. Comparing the NM20 with the Sia, I mean, like I said, they've got kind of the same style of tuning, but the balance that's been struck between the bass and the mids and the treble and the is totally different. So this is way warmer. This is, I mean, this in terms of its technicalities doesn't even stand a chance with the NM20. In terms of its musicality and being organic and old school, definitely. I would even probably say that this is more organic, musically organic than the NM20. This is like if you were listening to, let's say, comparatively, this is like if you were listening to a valve amplifier with those great big drivers that they used back in the day, full range drivers, 15-inch drivers, 12-inch drivers, Audax, Celestion, Tannoy, okay? While this is already a solid state kind of sound, more of like a late 80s, early 90s type of sound. It's warm, but plenty detailed. It's got a nice musicality to it. It's got a nice timbre, a nice tonality, and a nice engagement to it. But in this analogy that I'm trying to make, let's say that because of the fact they're using a Beryllium driver, the treble can be maybe for some just a little bit too much. Like I said, in my case, I particularly didn't find it too much, but I'm not going to deny that there might be people that maybe are obviously more capable of hearing than I am because of the fact that I'm already as old as I am, that might find that the amount of energy that's present here will be just a little bit too much for them. And then we'll prefer something like the Venture Electronic C, or going back here to the NFACOUS stuff, they will probably prefer something like maybe the RG as compared to this. Okay. So that's it, guys. Basically, that in essence, that's what I have to say here about the NM20. It's a nicely built IM. It's got a nice shell. It's kind of a plastic resin shell. In terms of the actual faceplate, what they've changed over the previous NM20, they've given us this kind of metal finish here on the outside. But in essence, the shell is very, very similar. I mean, you can see here that the shell is almost identical shells. Okay, very, very equal. This is kind of a more polished type of finish. This is kind of like a kind of more satin type of finish, but very, very similar shell size, everything. Okay, you can, if you look carefully. Okay, fit, like I said earlier, fine, no issues, absolutely no issues with the fitted perfectly. I did try the 07 tips, which I like using a lot, and also these tips from Panon, and to be honest, I mean, I didn't really hear any difference which was going to tell me no, it's you have to change them, that's it. No, these stock MS tips worked perfectly. The reason why on the RG mainly and on the RA why I changed the tips is because of the way the IM is. It's a tiny IM. This is a really, really small IM. Because of the way that the IM is, it needs a tip that has a little bit of a more solid outer part, so that it can hold the IM in place a little bit better, because the IM doesn't, at least in my ear, it doesn't sit straight. It sits very much like this. So with the softer tips, the MS tips, the stock ones, it kind of falls off. This one actually sits nice and flush. It really goes nice and into my ear. And if you actually see, the reason it has to do with the nozzle angle. If you look at the RA and if you look at the RG, you can see the nozzle angle on this one is more correct. On the NM20 is more correct. So you can have it sitting straight in the ear, but that the nozzle will go straight into my ear canal. While this one, the nozzle is kind of straight. So because it's straight, you have to angle the IM, and by angling the IM, then it kind of wants to fall off. Yeah, that's in essence it, guys. Just to finalize a quick recap. The NM20 uses the latest MC2L driver type that they've used now for a number of years. It's using, instead of the composite diaphragm, it's using a beryllium coated diaphragm. Base, it's a base which is very similar to the base of the RG15 in terms of overall energy, quality, everything. The mids, upper mids and treble are more emphasized, and so they give a very detailed, very clean sound, but the way that they've done it and the quality of the driver is one of the reasons for that, and the overall balance that they were able to strike is such that it never reaches that point where it gets aggressive, or no, you can carry on pushing the volume, that you don't hear any driver breakup, you don't hear any sort of strain from the driver. It's your ears that will ultimately dictate, okay, this is loud enough, let's lower it. Okay, compared to the NM2, which basically it is a successor, it is a superior IEM. Fair enough. This costs, I forgot to mention the price. This costs about $120 from direct from NFACOUS, while this costs $85. I think the difference in price is well justified. Honestly, it's well justified. This is a much better IM than the NM20, much better. Especially if what you were finding in terms of its lacking in the NM20, in the NM2, sorry, was the way that the mids and the upper mids and treble can continue being polished when you push the volume. This becomes less polished, less elegant. This maintains that elegance, maintains that its composure. Okay. That's it, guys. I'm kind of going to be repeating myself now. I'll show you now the graphs and we'll wrap it up. All right, you take care. Hi guys, welcome now to the graph section here for the NM20. Let me just, you know what, I'm going to start with the NA2 Plus and work my way up from there so that you guys can better understand everything. All right. Okay, let's start here with the NA2 Plus. The NA2 Plus, as I said earlier on, it has that very neutral base that NFACOUS does on some of their IEMs. We're talking about a base gain of roughly 5 dB, so very neutralish. And then yes, upper mids and treble, emphasized, but the balance that is struck, it's actually surprisingly good. That point that I usually mention for you guys to have a look at between 100 hertz and see where that matches up there. Yes, it is energetic. It is, there's a lot of energy up top there. And for the most part, it's fine. It sounds good. There's actually quite a bit of making me think about the HD Sound Heart Mirror in terms of its overall presentation. The HD Sound Heart Mirror, for those that know what it is, it was an IM that came out like in 2019, 2020, and it also had a very neutral bass, but then absolutely phenomenal, mids, upper mids and treble, extension all the way to the moon and back. But the way the balance was and how it sounded, it just worked fantastically. It was let's say kind of akin with the Blonde 03, probably two of the IEMs that kind of stood out the most back in those days. I mean, it completely walked all over the T2 from TNI-Fi. The T2 from TNI-Fi had created a kind of a cult following for it, and the HD Sound Heart Mirror came along and just obliterated the T2 completely. Did everything the T2 could do and more and better. Okay, so this is the graph for the NA2 Plus. The graph for the NM2 is this one. Okay, and let me just put here back the other one. And if you notice here, in essence, although they are using two different modeled drivers, in essence, the difference between the NM and the NA2, the NM2, which is the one in black, okay, and the NA2 Plus, the NA, which is the one in orange, is that one has bass and the one doesn't. Okay, and so what you got in the NM2 was a sound which was in certain aspects similar to the sound of the NA2 Plus, but now with a more solid bass output, and that solid bass output just conferred songs like EDM and reggae and all that song, those genres, an energy and an impact, especially on drums, which was much nicer. It was just in this area of the upper mids and treble that, for some reason, and I think it had to do obviously with the driver, because it's a different, slightly different driver, that it just became a little bit unpolished when pushed. Okay. Enter now the NFAudio NM20, and the NM20 is this, and the NM20 is very much the same thing as the NM2 in terms of its bass, but it's now a better quality bass because the driver is also improved, and they've also given it more energy up top here in the upper mids and treble. But the energy that they've given, and if you look at the graph only by itself, and let me just take away the NM2 for a second, if we take that point of the 100 hertz and you look, you're going to see that you have plenty of energy there, plenty of treble, loads. And if you look at the graph by itself, the graph doesn't truly show how it sounds. It doesn't. You think that you are going to think that this is going to try to kill you, murder your ears, and so on and so forth. And I'm not going to deny that maybe if you are sensitive, yes, then stay away from this. This is not for you. If you are treble sensitive, don't go here. Now, if you like a very high quality treble, then you are in the right place, because that's exactly what the NM20 is capable of doing, is give you a very high quality treble and upper mids from a single driver, and it does it very well. You can push it and it doesn't lose its composure, it scales properly, and it just sounds very, very good. Like the name implies, it's for professional usage, it's for stage usage, and it just keeps its composure, and you push it and nothing, it just maintains itself throughout. As I mentioned, I compared it as well with the RG15, okay, and this is the graph of the RG15 here, and again you can see the RG15 very similar overall in its graph to the NM20, very similar, a little bit less energetic. I would say that maybe for those that are wanting to try or that like, if you've tried, that like the NFACOUS sound, but you want something a little bit less treble, but maintaining the nice bass output, then the RG15 will probably be a nice option, because it drops the amount of energy here just by the right amount to make it sound very pleasant. The RA15, which I also talked about, in its stock format, it's got the bass that you see here in this purple line. Let me just take away the other two so it doesn't confuse. But then this area here becomes way too emphasized. It becomes even more emphasized to a certain extent than on the RG. Okay, it really becomes more emphasized. And so the balance that's struck between the two extremes is not a pleasant balance, and I just didn't enjoy it. So honestly, that's why I retuned it, and I retuned it for it to come down to this level that you see now. And at this level, the balance that is now struck is very nice. And if you actually compare it, again, taking that 100 hertz point there, 100 hertz, okay, you see the amount of energy that you have up top there, okay, it's just basically the treble. The bass is nice and smooth, slight drop off. When you compare it with the RG, take again the 100 hertz point, okay, just basically treble go up top, and again the bass nice and smooth, little rise. I mean, honestly, these two, they sound actually very, very similar, but I give the edge to the RG15. I still give the edge to the RG15. And let's go back here to the NM20. Okay, NM20, going back to the NM20, like I mentioned, it's an RG15 with more detail, with cleaner upper mids and treble, and that detail then makes the bass sound clean and detailed and very incisive. Although the fact that one uses a metal shell and the one uses a plastic resin shell, you do notice a slight difference there in the timbre and the tonality. The RG may be slightly warmer in the tonality, but both are very nice in the timbre and in the tonality. Both are very nice, and I like them both. And then finally, I also said that I had here the Venturi electronics, and this is the Venturi electronics. The Venturi electronics is basically, let's say, got the bass of the NM20, but then significantly less energy in the mids, upper mids and treble. And yes, like I also mentioned earlier in the review, it makes for a very organic, old school kind of sound that is, okay technically, while the other is a very engaging, very musical type of sound, but with a high level of technicalities associated with it. This is basically the simplest way I can put it. And as I said, I mean, the graphs, to a certain extent, they show exactly what I'm talking about. But when you listen to it, be it one or the other, you don't notice these peaks. You don't notice none of this. It just, these are the NFACOUS stuff is a perfect example of IEMs that the graphs don't exactly convey what the sound is like once you hear it. And that's it, guys. I mean, there's really not much more that I can add to this. NM20, solid IM, well built. Okay, it's $120. Yes, it's got plenty of competitors out there, but it's well built. It's solid. It's got good accessories. If you think that a sound that is very detailed in the upper mids and treble is something that will appeal to you, definitely I would say give it a go. Why not? I don't think you'll regret it. If on the other hand you have something which already sounds like that and it's and it satisfies you, then why go spend the money? Like I said, I mean, spend it on something that is really going to be different and bring something to the table that's different to what you already own. If you're just going to get something for it to be another copy paste, whatever. I mean, if you have something that's like this but maybe is a hybrid and you want maybe a single driver that is capable of doing it, yeah, maybe then it would make sense. But otherwise, choose wisely. Always choose wisely. All right, guys, like and subscribe as always. Any questions, please feel free to ask me and I'll do my best to answer as quickly as possible. You take care now. Bye bye.